And it's so nice to see some faces that haven't been here through the summer. And it's, but it's also, it's a reminder that we're in a time of transition, right? I said to Elizabeth this morning, it's a tween day outside. It's not summer and it's not fall. It's not hot and it's not cool and crisp. We're kind of in the liminal space between the end of summer and the beginning of fall, right? At least here, John Scott's got 2 feet of snow already out there, I think. But anyway, so what, we're in a period, once again, of change, but we're always, right? Always. Change is constant. Change is the nature of the universe, the nature of our reality. I'm going to read a little, very short piece here by 2 Tibetan teachers, Ayin Rinpoche and Allison Choyang Zangmo. And what it says is, if we're really reflecting on impermanence, then we can see that the important things are compassion and loving others, giving to others, taking care of others, because everything else becomes meaningless in a sense, right? So when we talk about impermanence, that can sound nihilistic. And yet it's the reality, right? Everything changes and everything goes out of existence at some point. Everyone, everything, even the universe, right? I mean, I see various cosmological scenarios that they're kind of conjecturing about for the end of the universe, but the fact is that even the entire universe will end at some point. So there's nothing permanent. Not in our lives, not anywhere. So where do we grab on? We humans like to grab onto something. We like some stability. We like some reliability. This is not new. This is old. The monks, if we look at some of the koans, the monks were looking for the same thing. A koan that came to mind to me this morning, there's a koan where a monk says, at the end of the eon, will this still exist? And the teacher says, yes, this will still exist. And then later on, he asks another teacher the same question. At the end of the eon, will this still exist? And the teacher says, no, it won't exist. So in a sense, what the teachers are doing, that they often did, was they're just kind of playing. They're tearing it away. If you grab onto it, I'm going to take it away from you. If you don't want it, I'm going to give it to you. That kind of was the method of teaching. So the monk is grabbing on. Is this going to exist at the end of the eon? Oh, yes. Oh, no. But the fact is that everything, right? Everything, that's the important word there, will cease to exist sooner or later. Sooner or later. So what does that give us as a basis for living our lives? If nothing is solid, if nothing is permanent, we're seeing it, right? In our lives at this moment, the whole world is topsy-turvy, right? Many of the reliable things, or things that we thought were reliable, aren't. from the weather, the climate, which is changing rapidly. We can almost see it from year to year. You know, the political climate, the stability of our country, perhaps the future of our country. Around us, there's just turmoil. And as humans, we long to go back to normal, right? As if normal ever existed, but that's another thing. But we want it to go, we want that predictability, that reliability, that stability, that world that we knew, the world that we grew up in, you know, and yet it is more and more and more clear to me every day that world is gone. You know, even sort of as a myth. I mean, we are in a completely different time, and the rules are completely different. And if we're looking for that solid thing to grab onto, it's not there. And many people are finding this very difficult, right? It's like all the old road signs have been taken down. All the reliable ways that we navigated through our lives have disappeared. Our country is in upheaval. Our communities are in upheaval. Our lives and our families are in upheaval. And so this lesson of impermanence is right in our faces. And unfortunately, it can be a painful lesson. It can be a very difficult way to live. So here these teachers are presenting this possibility that the way to live in the face of impermanence is by giving compassion and loving kindness to others. That gives us a basis for acting. That gives us a basis for living our lives. That gives us a basis for directing our practice. That gives us a basis for being with our families and our friends and our coworkers. A basis that lies outside of the narrow walls of our ego and does not depend on things being normal. Again, the more we look for normal, the more we're going to suffer. The more we look for things to be like they were, the more we're going to suffer. The more we look for solid things that we can cling, what is this culture? What is this society telling us? The most important solid thing that we can cling to is our possessions. Things, get more things quickly. The exact opposite. Things are incredibly impermanent, right? You buy that beautiful new car, and before you're even off the lot, it's depreciated 40% or something like that. And you don't go 2 miles before it's dirty, and and then this beautiful, beautiful thing is now getting old. It's getting scratches, it's getting rust, it's getting dirty. Things are one of the greatest illusions. And things can't make us feel good. They can't make us feel whole. That's an enormous myth that's being perpetrated. Did any of you folks encounter this week? There's a book that's being talked about, and I unfortunately don't know the title. But it's written by a fellow who was a futurist, who was invited by a group of billionaires to come and consult with them. Did any of you come across it? It was on talked about on NPR this week a couple of times. Anyway, the gist of it is this. This guy got an invitation from a group of billionaires because he's a futurist, and to come and help answer some of the questions that they had. And so they invite him to a place that's somewhere remote out in the high desert, where he has to drive. This is all true. This is all true. Several hours from the airport. And he's thinking, oh my God, how can these billionaires, they're all tech billionaires, Silicon Valley guys, how can they be coming out here, driving several hours in the desert? Well, of course, he comes over the rise near the place, and there's the hidden airport with all the huge G7s or whatever they are that billionaires fly around in these days. And so he's at this meeting with them, and they start asking him questions. And most of the questions center around their survival bunkers. Like, should we have them in Alaska or New Zealand? Essential questions like that. And he's just, he's stunned, but he's answering these questions for these guys, So the bottom line here is they are absolutely convinced that there is a major calamity coming. And they are preparing for that calamity. They're prepared to spend millions and millions of dollars building these underground fortresses. And they're actually hiring Navy SEALs to come and defend them. So they have the SEALs are ready so that the minute this as yet undetermined event happens, the SEALs will converge on their bunkers and be ready to protect them from the angry hordes of the rest of us who aren't going to like whatever it is that's happening. Anyway, okay, there's an essential problem in this, right? And the problem, which is just, I had thought about this previously, but it sort of popped up here. I guess they all thought about it, is when money is no longer worth anything, how do you keep the Navy SEALs from shooting you and taking over your bunker? And that they haven't been able to solve that conundrum, right? It's fascinating because again, everything is around material possessions. It's not about, they haven't thought about, we should instill loyalty and we should treat these people really decently so they want to treat us decently. It's, it's all about how do we control them and direct them, Anyway, yeah. So they're trying. They're like the monk at the end of the empty eon. Will this still exist? At the whatever it is, global catastrophe. Can I survive in my bunker? And they're clinging. He said that they actually had the impression that these guys are looking forward to it. And not only are they looking forward to it, but the worst part, they are doing nothing to avert it. They all intend to continue doing whatever it is they're doing, producing whatever it is they're producing, depleting resources, exploiting people, going on and on until whatever day it is that the cataclysm occurs. There's not a bit of humanity, not a complete sociopathy. These are the leaders of our world today. Very scary. But they're looking for that solid thing to cling to. because their possessions don't. You don't have $1 billion and you have nothing solid. You can have $1 billion and have nothing to cling to. Right? And so they're going, because the culture has told them that, they're going helter-skelter in the wrong direction. They're not thinking, how can we use our money and our power and all of these things to help other beings? How can we use our money and our power to avert whatever catastrophe it's coming? How can we use our money and power to mitigate it, to help other people suffer less? Not even on their radar. So we as Zen practitioners or Buddhists are sort of going the opposite way. Right? We've got to find a way to live our lives that's not dependent on clinging, that's not dependent on possessions, that's not dependent on things being static and unchanging, because we know that everything is changing. Some things we like, some things we don't like. Doesn't matter. We don't get a vote. Everything changes constantly, constantly. And so the only answer is not to cling. The only answer is not to try to solidify that which is not solid. Not to try not to go back to a reality, first of all, which probably never existed, but at least in our imaginations existed. You know, you see all these things about how wonderful the 50s were and how wonderful the 60s were. And having lived through both of those decades, I can tell you, it ain't true. But we create nostalgia for like the myth of the past that never existed. We cling to that, you know. And so this teaching is saying, no, the only thing that we can build our lives on is others, is the well-being of others, is relating to others with love and compassion, is giving of ourselves. We can't give it away. We can't give ourselves away. Well, we don't have a self. That's a whole nother subject. So that makes it hard to give it away just to start with. But we cannot exhaust ourselves through generosity of spirit. That's a boundless, boundless pool. And the more that we do that, the more that we are fulfilled, the more that we experience a certain amount of peace. And the more that we're connected with the world, that we're connected with others. Again, look at those guys going in their bunkers. That's the most powerful metaphor for disconnection. For I don't give a fuck about anybody or anything, right? Disconnection. We humans cannot survive in disconnection. We as Buddhists understand that maybe better than others in many cases. We need our connections, right? You know, scientists who've looked at the evolution of humanity, I don't know exactly what they're called, paleoanthropologists or anyway, you know, they used to think that the reason that humans survived out on the savannas, out when we were in our most earliest development, surrounded by many things that wanted to eat us, was that we had tools. They thought that's the advantage. We can make a spear or an axe or something like that, and we can survive. Well, what they've subsequently come to say is no, it was community. It was community that gave humans their competitive advantage. Not to say that tools weren't valuable, but ultimately it was community. It was helping one another. You know, what's that oft-quoted thing from Margaret Mead when she's asked about, you know, what was the first indications of civilization? And she said it's when she saw mended bones. Because until we had community, if you broke a bone, essentially you were dead, right? You couldn't lay around for weeks healing your leg and not be killed and eaten by something. But suddenly you had community, and they protected you and sheltered you and took care of you while your bone healed and you survived. You know, today we can't really appreciate the enormity of that transition. That's fundamental to us as human beings. Caring for others. And it's fundamental for us as Zen practitioners, caring for others. And that is how we give direction and meaning to our lives in this time of chaos, in this time of maybe greater than usual instability. You know, and I ultimately think that that's also, I can't say whether things are going to improve maybe in our lifetimes or, you know, but if they are, it's going to be because of that. It's not going to improve. This world is not going to improve because we get more stuff, right? We got to get less stuff. You got to find ways to live without and all of that. And where does that come from, right? We cannot build our lives. We cannot reinforce our egos and build structures around possessions, around things. It must come out of relationship. Thank you.
Peter, it's Molly. I just wanted to thank you for that because it really resonates with something that was bouncing around for me for a bit. That sort of, I get so many requests for donations, and then I'll see things on the news that, oh gosh, I wish I could help that person or that cause or something. And instead of letting myself be overwhelmed and not do anything, that's the message I've been working with now is just doing what's best for all, starting from my heart, and the rest will just follow. So thanks.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is the compass, not here, right? It is following our hearts. You know, where are we drawn? What needs us? What calls to us? You know, we're taught in this culture to be so cerebral that we lose that other guidance system. You know, but what I read recently, that the heart sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. You know, it's an important center of our being.
In leaning towards community, I've been thinking about language. I'm going to take a friend who has cancer down to the coastal Maine botanical gardens, and I used to volunteer there. I sort of know the place, but of course, everything changes. So there are a lot of differences. But the way that the learner garden for the senses is structured, and I was thinking about how to introduce that, and people who are differently abled came to mind, and I thought, whoa, different from what? And so I thought, maybe just saying all abilities might be a closer match, to heart speak.
The botanical garden is such a wonderful place. It's really.
Peter, a couple of weeks ago, you sent out a couple of questions for us to think about. And one of them, I think you sort of gave an answer to a little while ago, and that was, um, is it possible for a bodhisattva to burn out? And what you just said, I think, is part of that answer of the spirit of generosity. Generosity of spirit is the more the more you use it, the more prolific it is, the more it has to give. And and then I thought about, well, what about the bodhisattvas who do burn out? What's going on with them? Um, or those who try to take up the bodhisattva path. And it seems like uh, looking for a particular outcome is what gets us in trouble. So we have much spirit to be generous with, but I think when we expect, okay, I'm going to donate my money here and this or that's going to happen, there are going to be no more homeless people on the streets, or um, so I think maybe the bodhisattva does not gives what he has to give, um, but doesn't look for a particular conclusion, a particular response, have an expectation. Uh, and that's kind of hard to do, but I think with the idea of the spring of generosity being unbounded, um, maybe that's a way to get through inevitable disappointments.
Yeah. Well, there is a nursing home in Nirvana for the burned out bodhisattvas. But no, I think I've told this story before about when I was working in a residential hospice, and a Tibetan Lama came to talk with the staff, and basically, so someone asked him the question, like, if we're in these giving relationships, how do we protect ourselves? And his answer was, it's exactly that thought that is the problem. The idea that we have to protect ourselves, that we have something to protect, it sets up the tension, sets up the opposition, and self-care is always important, but our capacity for giving is so boundless that it, doesn't. Hospice, like Kathy's here, and she worked as a hospice nurse for many years. I think it's one of the most wonderful places to practice compassion, and in the context that everybody dies. You can't change the outcome in hospice, and you therefore cannot attach to the outcome, so you're totally immersed in the process, and being with people and helping people be with whatever time they have, but it's always very obviously finite. And in a sense, many Buddhist practitioners do go into hospice work in one way or another, volunteers or professionals. And I think it's not only is it wonderfully important to give that gift of hospice to people who are dying, but it's also a wonderful opportunity to practice, because we can't attach to the outcome. All we can do is make it a little more comfortable, a little happier for the people that are in the process. Kathy, you're not on. Hang on.
Yeah. Kind of looking back on my life experience, I have had the experience of burning out. And you're talking about it, Susan. So what it was for me, and what I experienced it as burnout, which for me, I felt separated from my soul. That was what that felt like to me. And I knew from that I had to make a change. But I was the director of nursing in a drug and alcohol treatment center that was very well known many years ago. And it was a really, really good place with a lot of spirit and kindness and love and compassion. And it was bought out, and a lot of staff left. And it was clearly to make money. It was that sort of a change. And, that loving kindness thing started changing and all that. And I stayed because I thought I could save it. So that, you see, that's the goal that was driving me. I've got to stay, as awful as it is, because I have to save this. So for me, that's the trigger in my head that says, that's what burned me out. I was still being kind in my interactions with my staff and with people, but I had this bigger goal that, oh my God, if I leave, it's just going to, and of course I left, and of course the place did close a year later, but that was a really, really important lesson to me. And so much now in what I'm finding in Zen and Peter, talking with Peter and listening to all of you and the other people I sit with, is it's so much simpler than it had. It's just, again, I've said it before here. I mean, just that idea that that's all I have to do is just be kind and be in my relationships, and not thinking that I'm going to save the world or save something particularly that I think should go the way it should go. So thanks for all that, the cues on that this morning.
It's our sense of self that gets us into trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
reminded me, there's a line from Chow Chow that I'm gonna, I may or may not quote well, but it was something to the effect as, how am I expected to say?
I heard a woman, an activist actually from one of the, third world countries, and she said, if you're coming here to help us, don't come. If you're coming here to heal yourself, you're always welcome.